This is my third SharkByte, and at the first one I had also not that intense, but I did had a very intense story as well about a positive outlook in life and such things like that. And people came after me, "Wow, that was great, but it's really dark, and why don't you do a lighter one the next time?" So in the US this year, you can look it up on YouTube. I decided to do a fun, happy one and talk about an Austrian tradition called Krampus and how we scare people to death during Christmas season. And then it got noticed that this is going to be Vienna and it's going to be Austria, my own home country. So I thought, well, maybe do something for the third time that has a real lighter spirit. I'm from a little town called Obendorf. Obendorf near Salzburg. If you ever look at Austria on a map, it kind of looks like, yeah, well, we say it kind of looks like a schnitzel with a little extension cord. And right in the middle there is Salzburg. Well, Obendorf is a rather unremarkable town. It was the part of a German town, actually part of an Austrian town that got split after some wars. And we're about 14,000, 15,000 people. But we have about 500,000 visitors per year. The reason for those visits are those two guys. As you look, they look very lively in the picture. So, the left one is a dude called Joseph Moore. He lived around at the end of the 18th century. He was a priest. He came up from a very poor uprising, had pretty much fatherless, lived with a poor mother. So traditionally at that time, that meant you either go to work for some farmers or you go into the church service. He did the later. But he was a very gifted young man. He was a very talented young man. He wrote poems all his way through. In 1816, he wrote a poem he really liked. Now, about 2 years later, he was priest or additional priest in Obendorf. And the story goes, although historically speaking, it's not really that accurate, that the church failed during Christmas, the church organ failed during Christmas time, and they needed something to perform. So he called up his friend, or more likely took a horse about the next town, which is 15 kilometers apart, to a teacher called Franz Xaver Gruber. You can't get more Austrian names than that. Who was a composer, but also a teacher and other stuff. And I said, well, I have this little poem and want to create a song out of it and perform together with you during Christmas time. That's actually not the real church that was performed in. The real church sadly got burned down due to an accident. Well, accident being it being made of wood, and lighting in the church was made of candles. So, yeah, accident being kind of self-serving. But this little chapel is built in the place where the church originally stood, and this little chapel is visited by 500,000 people in the world. In 1818, this song was originally performed. By accident, the guy who repaired the church organ, there's a little truth to that story, was present at that time. He went back to Tyrol in Fügen, and he presented this song to his own church choir and said, well, that's a nice little song, let's perform it. And two people from that choir then later on that year got the possibility to perform in front of the Austrian Emperor, Franz I, and the Russian Tsar, Alexander I, this song. They taught the song to other people. About 2 years later, those other people traveled around Germany, then Leipzig, and brought the song to the world, more or less. The Germans, as they always did, thought, well, this is a nice Tyrolean song, so we put it in a little book and sent it around the world. It got quite far, but the next emperor of Austria, no, actually it was Ludwig I of Prussia. My wife is sitting in the back. She's kind of impressed that I correctly remember all those names. I know that. Ludwig I of Prussia heard that song, loved that song, and sent back word to Austria, I want the record of this original song, because they all thought it's from Michael Haydn, which is a famous Austrian composer, for those who don't know. And as it turns out, Joseph Moore was already dead, but Franz Xaver Gruber was still alive. And so the story came to know that it was actually a Salzburgian song. that's the manifest she wrote. And it's very hard to read from the back, right? I mean, the guys in front can read German, and they can tell you what it is. Well, I have some translations here for you. Anyone can guess what this one is? No? How about this one? I put this up for Stephen especially. Can you read it? No. But Megumi can read the next one. This song has been translated in 300 different languages. It's the most popular Christmas carol ever. You all know it by heart. Now the Germans are going, ah. And for the rest of us. So that's what a little town in Austria can do to your Christmas carols. Thank you.